It was a different kind of Passover meal, that's for sure. I sat down, and Philip immediately leans over to me and says, "Hey, Thomas, I think something really special is about to happen tonight." And I just look at him and I say, "I doubt it." I was wrong. Jesus got up from the table and he picked up this basin of water and a towel. I remember thinking, hey, what's Jesus doing with the foot water? Surely he's not gonna, I doubt he's gonna wash anybody's feet. I was wrong. Jesus walked over and knelt in front of Bartholomew. Bart just sat there. He didn't do anything, he didn't say anything. He just sat there and let Jesus wash his feet. We all did. Jesus wiped Bartholomew's feet dry, walked over to James, Andrew. He washed all of our feet. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is such a strange, wonderful experience. I doubt anybody's gonna say anything right now. I was wrong. You know who broke the silence? Good old Peter.
No way you're gonna wash our feet. That's what I told him. He could wash other people's feet, but he wasn't gonna wash mine. So I looked at him and I said, Jesus, you're not gonna wash my feet. I mean, you're a king. And then he said to me, well, then you can't have anything to do with me. And I'm like, ouch, okay. Wash my feet, wash my hands, wash my whole body if you have to. He just looked at me and said, no, your feet will do just fine, Peter. In the midst of washing our feet, he teaches us servanthood.
Then Jesus took the bread and some wine and he blessed it. And he told us that this was going to be a new covenant. A covenant sealed with his blood. Later he said that we were all going to lose faith in him. That very night. I remember thinking, I'm never going to lose faith in you, Jesus. But I didn't say anything. No, I just sat there.
I couldn't just sit there. I had to say something. So I looked at him and I said, Jesus, I love you. You can count on me. Everybody else may fall away, but I will not. You can count on me. He looked at me and he smiled and he said, Peter, you will deny me 3 times before tomorrow. Ouch. Next thing I knew, we were wrapping things up and heading to the garden.
Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you do not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground.
While he was still speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He drew near to Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus said to him, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, "Lord, shall we strike them with the sword?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched the ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come out against him, "Have you come out against us a robber with swords and clubs? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness."
Once we got to the garden, it just got crazy. Jesus asked Peter, James, and myself to go a little further into the garden with him and pray. And we did. We tried. We kept falling asleep. And Jesus kept waking us up. Remember at one point in time he said, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." That's true. To think this whole mess got started because of Judas. Did he really think what he was doing was right?
There he is. He's the one you want, the one praying by himself. Now, the others, they'll try to create some kind of a scene, but the one I kiss on the cheek, he's the one you want. 30 pieces of silver, right? That's what we agreed on, 30 pieces of silver. Now remember, forget about the rest. The one that I kiss on the cheek, he's the one you want.
Kiss. Judas betrays Jesus with the kiss of a friend. Then it got crazy. Peter picked up a sword and he cut this guy's ear off. And Jesus, he just reached down, picked up the ear, put it back on the guy's head. Like nothing had ever happened. And then they took him. I would love to tell you that we all fought for him, but we didn't. Everyone ran. I ran. So ashamed.
What have I done? What have I done? I was so stupid to think. I've killed him. I've killed him. I've crucified Jesus.
And then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house, and Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled the fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. And then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light, looking closely at him, said, "This man was also with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I don't know him." And a little later someone saw him and said, "You are also one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, "Certainly this man was with him, for he too is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I know not what you're talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly.
Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, "Prophesy, who was that who struck you?" They said many other things against him, blaspheming him. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both the chief priests and scribes. And they led him away to their council, and they said, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." So they all said, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he said to them, "You say that I am." Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips." Then the whole company of them arose, and they brought him before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And Pilate asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Then Pilate said to the chief priest and to the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea from Galilee even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether this man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at great length, but he made no answer. The chief priest and the scribe stood by, vehemently accusing him. And Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, they sent him back to Pilate.
Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him." But they all cried out together, "Away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder." Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus. But they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and for murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over to their will.
I mean, it really makes no sense. There I was, sitting in a jail cell, rotting for stealing, murder, anything else you can think of. I've pretty much done it. I knew that the next time I stepped foot outside of this jail cell was going to be my last. And then the guards, they came and got me. And they took me out and they put me next to this guy who had been beaten to a pulp. And I remember looking around and there were all these people there. And Pilate looked out to the crowd and he said, "Which one of these men do you want me to release?" I mean, it was obvious, right? I'm the criminal. I'm the guy. I knew they were going to say, "Let this Jesus go." So I was prepared to accept my fate. I was going to tell them exactly where they could go. But then the strangest thing happened. They started chanting my name, Barabbas, Barabbas. And the next thing I know, the guards, they took me and they threw me out into the crowd. And then they took this Jesus. There I was, a dead man. And they took this guy off to Golgotha. It made no sense at all. So I followed them all the way there.
And as they led him away, they seized one, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. And there followed him a great multitude of people and of women who were mourning and lamenting for him. But turning to Jesus, Jesus said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bore and the breasts that never nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry? 2 others who were criminals were led away to be put to death with him. And when they came to the place that is called the Skull, there they crucified him, and the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. When Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," and they cast lots to divide his garments. And the people stood by watching, but the ruler scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself, if he is the Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged railed at him, saying, "Are you not the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we are receiving the due reward of our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong." And he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise."
I crucified Jesus. It's what the crowd wanted, and that's what they got. Personally, I don't feel like that man did anything to deserve that, but I'm just a soldier doing my job. The governor would hand down the sentence, and that's when I would go to work. I loved that job. I felt like I was administering justice every time I nailed someone to a tree. But that man didn't deserve that. It made no sense to me. I was stationed at Golgotha that day. We had just raised the second criminal when they brought him to me. And I'll never forget the way he looked. He was beaten, spit upon, whipped. He was completely unrecognizable as a man. He was hideous. What was left of his clothes, they ripped off of him and threw him down on the cross, and that's when I went to work. Generally, when you crucify a man, the first hand is the most difficult. They'll try to fight you, get away. Typically, I'll have 2 soldiers on them to hold the hand down, but this man, he didn't put up a fight. I just thought he was exhausted. I mean, as an executioner, I've had men yell at me. They've tried to make deals with me, plead with me, but I wasn't prepared for that. He looked at us. He looked at me. And he said, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." He forgave me.
Forgive them, he said. And who is he? Forgive? Should have been me up there. I was the one that was supposed to be hanging on that cross. He took my place. And then I looked up, and I remember he took a deep, agonizing breath. And he said, "It's finished." And then he died.
Surely, this man was the Son of God.
Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, "Certainly this man was innocent." And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breasts. And all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance, watching these things. Now there was a man named Joseph, from the Jewish town of Arimathea. He was a member of the council, a good and righteous man, who had not consented to their decision and action, and he was looking for the kingdom of God. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then he took it down and wrapped it in a linen shroud and laid him in a tomb cut in stone, where no one had ever yet been laid. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning. The women who had come with him from Galilee followed and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments. On the Sabbath they rested according to the commandment.
Good Friday. How can one describe such a day? The wrongdoing of all humanity, putting to an end an innocent man, the Son of God. This is the story of Jesus' death by way of a cross, all in one moment bringing death to the bright light of our future. He never stopped loving us, and yet this is the incredible part of it. Our sin stopped his heart. Our sin drove the nails firmly in the hands of God. All along, these were the plans. We told ourselves that we were in control, and this was deemed sufficient for all of us. The brutal beating, the inhuman flogging, the naked humiliation. Heaven watched and saw it all. Our rebellion, our guilt, our shame, erasing the very notion of reconciling us with God, our sin and our debt, overcoming Jesus. Here is our King, obliterated. The enemy laughing, his plans unstoppable. There's no longer the sound of freedom rising. Now God's people are utterly broken. Behold the chains of mortality. Yes, this is what is true. We had heard the stories of old. The lost are found, the blind can see, the weak are made strong. But now we are witnesses to this reality. God is dead. We'd almost believed there is a way of redemption, there is a life of fulfillment, there is a peace beyond understanding. Now we know better. For us, we can say that God is encapsulated in this one realization: the single greatest sacrifice in human history is finished. How clearly we can see it. So what's so good about Good Friday? Just one thing: that the blood of Jesus can reverse the curse of sin and raise the dead to life. How clearly we can see it is finished. The single greatest sacrifice in human history, encapsulated in this one realization. We can say that God is for us. Now we know better. There is a peace beyond understanding. There is a life of fulfillment. There is a way of redemption. We had almost believed God is dead, but now we are witnesses to this reality. The weak are made strong. The blind can see. The lost are found. We had heard the stories of old. Yes, this is what is true. The chains of mortality utterly broken. Behold, freedom rising. Now God's people are unstoppable. There's no longer the sound of the enemy laughing. His plans obliterated. Here is our King, Jesus, overcoming our sin and our debt, reconciling us with God, erasing the very notion of our rebellion, our guilt, our shame. Heaven watched and saw it all: the naked humiliation, the inhuman flogging, the brutal beating, and this was deemed sufficient for all of us. We told ourselves that we were in control. All along, these were the plans firmly in the hands of God. Our sin drove the nails. Our sin stopped his heart. And yet, this is the incredible part of it. He never stopped loving us. The bright light of our future all in one moment, bringing death to death by way of a cross. This is the story of Jesus, the Son of God, an innocent man putting to an end the wrongdoing of all humanity. How can one describe such a day? Good Friday.